The sound of a hammer striking wood echoed through the dusty streets of Hawthorne, Nevada, as Lillian Price stood frozen on the boardwalk, clutching the eviction notice that would uproot her entire existence. The year was 1877, and the paper in her trembling hands was more than a legal document. It was a death sentence for everything she had built over the last 5 years. 30 days, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the constant bustle of the mining town. The midday sun beat down mercilessly, much like the circumstances that had brought her to this moment. Lillian folded the notice carefully, tucking it into the pocket of her faded blue dress before continuing toward the general store. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical bun, a few stubborn strands escaping to frame her face, weathered by the harsh Nevada climate but still striking at 26. 5 years ago, she had arrived in Hawthorne with nothing but determination and her late father's pocket watch. Now she owned or thought she owned the town's only bookshop and lending library. The bell above Harrigan's general store jingled as she entered, the familiar scent of coffee, leather, and tobacco momentarily distracting her from her troubles. "Afternoon, Miss Price," Owen Harrigan called from behind the counter. "You're looking like you've seen a ghost." "Worse than that," Lillian replied, approaching the counter. "I've seen a notice bearing Mayor Holloway's signature. He's reclaiming the land my shop sits on, claims there was an error in the deed when my father purchased it." Owen's bushy eyebrows shot up. "That can't be legal." "It is when the mayor owns the judge," Lillian said bitterly. "I have 30 days to vacate before they tear down my shop to make way for the new railroad office." The store fell silent as other patrons turned to listen. Lillian hadn't meant to announce her troubles so publicly, but perhaps it was better this way. No need for the rumor mill to distort what was happening. "What will you do?" Owen asked, leaning forward on his elbows. Lillian shook her head. "I don't know. Fight it somehow, I suppose, though I haven't the means for a proper legal battle." The bell above the door jingled again, and Lillian turned to see Wyatt Easton filling the doorframe with his broad shoulders. Dust covered his worn leather chaps, and his dark hat was pulled low over eyes that had seen more of the frontier than most men twice his 30 years. He'd ridden into town 6 months ago and taken work at the Palmer Ranch outside town, quickly earning a reputation as a skilled horseman who kept to himself. Their eyes met briefly before Lillian turned back to Owen, lowering her voice. "I'll take my usual supplies, plus some extra writing paper. I have letters to write." As Owen gathered her items, Wyatt approached the counter, standing a respectful distance away. Though they'd exchanged only casual greetings around town, Lillian was aware of him in a way that both unsettled and intrigued her. "Trouble at the bookshop, Miss Price?" Wyatt asked, his voice carrying the slight drawl of Texas. Lillian stiffened. "Nothing I can't handle, Mr. Easton," Owen snorted. "The mayor's forcing her out to build his precious railroad office. 30 days' notice after 5 years of honest business." Wyatt's expression darkened. "Holloway's been buying up half the town since the silver strike last winter. Man thinks money puts him above decency." "It usually does in places like this," Lillian replied, counting out coins for her purchases. "Not always," Wyatt said. "Not if someone stands against it." Lillian gathered her parcels. "And who might that someone be, Mr. Easton? The law's on his side. Law's one thing, justice is another." His eyes held hers. "Some things are worth fighting for." "My father taught me to pick my battles wisely," Lillian replied. "Good day, gentlemen." Outside, the afternoon had grown hotter, the air thick with dust from passing wagons. Lillian paused on the boardwalk, momentarily overwhelmed by the weight of her situation. Her shop wasn't just a business, it was her home, with living quarters upstairs and memories in every corner. She'd walked only half a block when Wyatt caught up to her. "Miss Price," he called, his long strides quickly closing the distance between them. "A moment of your time." Lillian stopped, adjusting her parcels. "Yes, Mr. Easton." "I couldn't help overhearing your predicament," he said, removing his hat. The gesture revealed dark hair with a slight curl and eyes that reminded Lillian of the mountains at dusk. "I might be able to help." "That's kind, but unless you're secretly a lawyer or have considerable influence with Mayor Holloway, I'm not sure what help you could offer." A smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Neither, I'm afraid, but I know something about land disputes and railroad companies. Before I came to Nevada, I worked for the Union Pacific in Wyoming." Lillian's interest was piqued despite her resolve to handle matters herself. "Go on." "Railroad companies need certain legal permissions that go beyond a mayor's authority. If Holloway's claiming the land for a railroad office, there's paperwork that has to be filed correctly. Mistakes in those filings could buy you time, maybe even invalidate his claim." "And you'd know how to find such mistakes," Wyatt nodded. "I would. I've seen how men like Holloway operate. They cut corners, especially when they think no one's looking." Lillian considered his offer. She'd prided herself on independence since her father's death, but pride wouldn't save her shop. "I'm not asking for charity, Mr. Easton." "None offered, Miss Price. Just knowledge that might be useful." He replaced his hat. "Consider it an investment in keeping Hawthorne from becoming just another company town." After a moment's hesitation, Lillian nodded. "Very well. I close the shop at 6. If you'd like to discuss this further, you're welcome to stop by then." "I'll be there," he promised. As Wyatt walked away, Lillian couldn't help but wonder about the cowboy's motivations. Men in frontier towns rarely involved themselves in others' troubles without expecting something in return. Yet something in his steadfast gaze suggested principles that ran deeper than self-interest. The afternoon passed in a fog of worry as Lillian helped the few customers who came into her shop. Most were regulars, Mrs. Daniels selecting a romance novel, young Tommy Wilkins exchanging one adventure story for another, and Professor Whitmore browsing scientific journals that Lillian specially ordered for him from San Francisco. None mentioned the eviction notice, though Lillian suspected the news had already spread throughout town. Hawthorne thrived on gossip as much as silver. At precisely 6 o'clock, as Lillian was locking the cash box, the shop bell jingled. Wyatt entered, hat in hand, looking somewhat out of place among the shelves of books. He'd cleaned up. She noticed his face washed free of trail dust, hair still damp from what must have been a hasty bath. "You came," she said, unable to hide her surprise. "I said I would." He glanced around the shop, taking in the carefully arranged shelves and reading corner with its worn leather chairs. "This is quite a place, Miss Price." "Thank you." Pride swelled in her chest despite her troubles. "My father started with just one shelf of books in the back of a dry goods store. I expanded after he passed." "He'd be proud," Wyatt said. The simple statement, delivered without flourish, struck Lillian more deeply than elaborate condolences ever had. "Let me show you the deed and the notice," she said, leading him to the small desk where she kept the shop's records. For the next hour, they pored over documents by lamplight, Wyatt asking pointed questions about the original purchase and subsequent communications with the mayor's office. His knowledge impressed Lillian beneath the trail-worn exterior, was a mind that grasped legal nuances she hadn't considered. "Here," he said finally, pointing to a clause in the deed. "Your father purchased this plot outright in '72, including mineral rights. Holloway's claiming the town retained those rights, which is his basis for reclaiming the land now that there's silver in these hills." "But that's not what the deed says," Lillian protested. Exactly. And the eviction notice doesn't mention a compulsory purchase order, which would be required for a railroad development on private land. Wyatt sat back, a glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. Holloway's overreaching his authority. He's counting on you not knowing your rights or having the means to fight. Hope flickered in Lillian's chest for the first time since receiving the notice. So I have grounds to contest this. You do. Wyatt's expression grew serious, but it won't be easy. Holloway controls most of the town council and has powerful friends in Carson City. This will get ugly before it's over. I'm not afraid of ugly, Mr. Easton. Lillian straightened her shoulders. This shop is all I have left of my father. I won't surrender it without a fight. Wyatt studied her, something like admiration in his gaze. Then you won't fight alone. Why? The question escaped before Lillian could think better of it. Why would you involve yourself in my troubles? We barely know each other. Maybe I've seen too many good people forced off their land by men with money and connections. He stood, his height emphasized by the shop's low ceiling. Or maybe I just don't like seeing someone bullied, especially when they've built something worth protecting. The sincerity in his voice made Lillian reconsider her initial skepticism. I appreciate your help, truly. But I need to be practical. What's our next step? First, we file a formal objection to the eviction. I can help draft that tonight. Then we need evidence of Holloway's real motives. Wyatt paced between the bookshelves. The railroad office is just an excuse. If he wanted that, there's plenty of vacant land closer to the proposed station site. You think there's something more valuable here? I think Holloway knows something about this land that you don't. Wyatt paused. Do you have access to the old mining surveys? The ones from before the town was established? Professor Whitmore might. He collects historical documents. Lillian glanced at the clock. I could ask him tomorrow. The sooner the better. Wyatt headed for the door. I'll return in the morning with that objection letter. And Miss Price. He turned, his expression grave. Be careful. Men like Holloway don't take kindly to resistance. After Wyatt left, Lillian locked the door and climbed the narrow stairs to her living quarters above the shop. The two-room apartment was modest but comfortable, with a small kitchen, a bedroom, and a sitting area where bookshelves continued from floor to ceiling. This space, filled with memories and carefully chosen possessions, represented everything she'd worked for since her father's death. The thought of losing it turned her stomach to lead, but for the first time since receiving the eviction notice, Lillian felt something besides despair. Wyatt Easton had given her hope and, perhaps more importantly, a plan. Sleep came fitfully that night, her dreams filled with faceless men tearing down her shop while she stood helpless. She woke before dawn, exhausted but determined. The early morning brought a clarity that had escaped her the previous day. While brewing coffee, Lillian made a mental list of potential allies and town people who might stand with her against Mayor Holloway. The list was shorter than she'd hoped, many owing debts or favors to the mayor or simply too afraid to cross him. A knock at the shop's back door startled her from these thoughts. Through the window, she saw Wyatt, a folded document in his hand. You're early, she said, opening the door. Rode into town at first light, he replied. Figured we shouldn't waste any time. Lillian invited him in, pouring a second cup of coffee. They sat at her small kitchen table while Wyatt explained the objection letter he drafted. This cites territorial law that protects property owners from seizure without proper compensation and procedure, he said, pointing to specific paragraphs. It formally requests a town council hearing before any action can be taken. Will that stop the eviction? It'll delay it. More importantly, it forces Holloway to make his case publicly. Lillian read through the document, impressed by its professional tone and legal precision. Where did you learn to write like this? A shadow crossed Wyatt's face. Let's just say I've had cause to understand property law. Before she could press further, another knock came at the front door of the shop. Through the window, Lillian spotted Mayor Theodore Holloway himself, accompanied by Sheriff Dale Miller. "Speak of the devil," she murmured, her heart racing. "It's Holloway and the sheriff." Wyatt stood quickly. "Sign the objection letter. I'll witness it." Lillian scrawled her signature, then moved to answer the door, conscious of Wyatt's presence behind her as she unlocked it. "Mayor Holloway," she greeted coolly. "The shop doesn't open for another hour." Holloway stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his expensive suit and gold watch chain proclaiming his prosperity. At 50, his once red hair had faded to a rusty gray, but his ambition clearly hadn't diminished with age. "Miss Price," he said with the practiced smile of a politician, "I thought we might discuss your situation privately." His gaze hardened when he noticed Wyatt. "Mr. Easton, I wasn't aware you had business here. Just helping a friend, Mayor." Wyatt's posture was relaxed, but Lillian sensed tension in the way he positioned himself slightly between her and the two men. Sheriff Miller lingered near the door, uncomfortable but determined to show loyalty to the mayor who had appointed him. "I've come to offer you a fair solution, Miss Price," Holloway continued, ignoring Wyatt. $500 for your inventory and fixtures, a generous sum that would allow you to relocate your business to a more suitable location." "More suitable than the one I legally own," Lillian countered. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding about the deed to this property, Mayor. One I intend to clarify before the town council." She handed him the objection letter. Holloway's face darkened as he skimmed its contents. "This is unnecessary, Miss Price. I'm trying to help you while advancing the interests of Hawthorne. The railroad connection is vital to our town's future." "Then I'm sure you've filed all the proper documentation with the territorial authorities," Wyatt interjected. "Survey approvals, land use permits, compensation assessments, all the requirements for claiming private property for railroad development." The mayor's eyes narrowed. "This doesn't concern you, Easton. It concerns any citizen who believes in property rights," Wyatt replied evenly. Lillian stepped forward. "I won't be intimidated, Mayor. My father purchased this land legally, and I intend to defend my ownership through proper channels. If the railroad truly needs this specific location, then we can discuss fair compensation after you've proven your case to the council." Holloway's practiced smile vanished. "Very well. If you insist on making this difficult, we'll proceed formally. But remember, Miss Price, I've lived in this territory since before you were born. I know how things work here." He turned to the sheriff. "Dale, make sure the council meeting is scheduled for next Monday. We'll settle this matter once and for all." After they left, Lillian released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That was direct. He's worried," Wyatt observed. "A man like Holloway doesn't make personal visits unless he's concerned about his plans being disrupted." "What did he mean about knowing how things work here?" "He was reminding you that he has influence with the council, the courts, maybe even the territorial governor." Wyatt's expression hardened. "Men like him believe money can buy anything, including justice." "Then we need to find out what he's really after," Lillian said with growing resolve. "And we need to gather whatever support we can before Monday's meeting." Wyatt nodded. "I'll speak with some of the ranchers. Holloway's railroad plans have many of them concerned about water rights and cattle crossings. They might stand with you if they see your fight as connected to theirs. And I'll visit Professor Whitmore today about those mining surveys." Their eyes met, an unspoken alliance forming between them. For a moment, Lillian saw something beyond determination in Wyatt's gaze, something that made her heart beat faster in a way that had nothing to do with their confrontation with the mayor. "We have 6 days," he said finally. "Let's make them count." The morning brought a steady stream of customers to Lillian's shop, many coming specifically to inquire about the rumored confrontation with Mayor Holloway. Word traveled quickly in Hawthorne. Some offered sympathy. Others shared stories of similar tactics the mayor had used to acquire property around town. A few even promised to attend the council meeting in support. By mid-afternoon, Lillian was able to close the shop briefly to visit Professor Whitmore, whose small house at the edge of town served as both home and unofficial museum of local history. The elderly professor welcomed her warmly, his white beard and spectacles giving him the appearance of a frontier Santa Claus. At 70, he'd seen Hawthorne grow from a handful of prospectors' tents to a proper town, documenting its development with scholarly precision. "Mining surveys, you say?" he murmured, leading Lillian through rooms cluttered with maps, artifacts, and stacks of yellowing documents. "Curious request. Most folks around here only care about current claims, not historical ones." "It might help me understand why Mayor Holloway is so determined to have my property," Lillian explained, briefly recounting the situation. The professor's eyes twinkled with interest. "Holloway's a businessman first and foremost. If he wants your land badly enough to create legal trouble, there's profit involved somehow." He pulled a large tube from a shelf. "Here we are, geological survey from 1858, before Hawthorne was formally established." They carefully unrolled the map on his desk, weighing the corners with books. The faded lines showed the original topography of the area, with hand-drawn notations about soil composition and mineral deposits. "Here's where your shop stands now," Professor Whitmore said, pointing to a spot near what was labeled Spring Creek, now buried beneath Hawthorne's Main Street. "Interesting. What is it?" Lillian leaned closer. "This notation here." The surveyor marked a significant silver-bearing quartz vein running directly beneath what's now your property. He traced a line with his finger. "According to this, it continues northward, right under what became the mayor's mansion when he built it 5 years ago." Understanding dawned on Lillian. He already knows about the silver under his house, but he can't access it without disrupting his home. "So he wants my property to mine from there." "Precisely," the professor confirmed. "And with silver prices climbing since the Comstock discoveries, that vein could be worth a fortune, far more than he's offering you for the shop. May I borrow this map for the council meeting?" "Better than that, I'll attend myself and testify to its authenticity." Professor Whitmore carefully rolled the map. "Theodore Holloway has been throwing his weight around this town for too long. Perhaps it's time someone stood up to him." Lillian left with the map and a lighter heart, hurrying back to her shop where she found Wyatt waiting. His clothes were dusty from riding, but his expression brightened when she approached. "Any luck with the professor?" he asked as they entered the shop. "Better than I hoped," Lillian replied, carefully unrolling the map on the counter. She explained what they'd discovered about the silver vein. Wyatt whistled softly. "That explains everything. Holloway's not interested in a railroad office, he wants a mining operation, but he's keeping that quiet because it would drive up the price of surrounding properties." "The professor agreed to testify at the council meeting," Lillian said. "What about the ranchers?" "Mixed results. Palmer and Davidson will support you. They've had their own run-ins with Holloway. The others are hesitant to get involved in town politics." Wyatt's expression grew serious. "There's something else. I heard rumors in the saloon that Holloway's brought in some men from Carson City, professional troublemakers, to intimidate you before the meeting." Concern flickered across Lillian's face. You think he'd resort to violence? Not directly. But a broken window, damaged inventory, threatening notes things to scare you into accepting his offer before the council can meet. Wyatt hesitated. I think someone should stay here with you at least until the meeting. I can't ask that of anyone. You're not asking, I'm offering. His eyes held hers steadily. I'll sleep in the store. No one will bother you with me here. Lillian wanted to refuse, to insist she could handle matters herself as she always had. But the determination in Wyatt's gaze told her this wasn't merely about protection, it was about standing together against injustice. Very well, she conceded, though the accommodations aren't exactly comfortable. I've slept on open ground during cattle drives and in mining camps from Colorado to California, Wyatt said with a slight smile. A bookshop floor will feel luxurious by comparison. That evening, after closing the shop, Lillian brought down blankets and a pillow for Wyatt, who insisted on sleeping near the front door. As she prepared a simple supper in her upstairs kitchen, she found herself wondering about the cowboy who had so unexpectedly become her ally. Over their meal of beans, bread, and coffee, Lillian finally voiced the question that had been on her mind since their first conversation. You never did tell me how a cowboy comes to know so much about property law and railroad regulations. Wyatt was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee cup. I wasn't always a ranch hand, he said finally. My family owned a cattle spread in western Texas, small but profitable, with good water access. When the Southern Pacific wanted to run a line through our land, they offered terms that would have ruined us. What happened? My father refused their offer. They responded by damming the creek that watered our herd, claiming it was on railroad survey land. His jaw tightened at the memory. We fought them in court for 2 years. I learned everything I could about property law, water rights, railroad regulations, anything that might help our case. Did it work? Wyatt shook his head. The judge was in their pocket. We lost everything. My father died a month after the verdict. Heart gave out from the stress, doctor said. Mother went to live with her sister in San Antonio. I headed west, working wherever I could find honest employment. I'm sorry, Lillian said softly. That explains your willingness to help me. I couldn't save my family's land, Wyatt replied, meeting her eyes. But maybe I can help you keep yours. In that moment, something shifted between them, a deepening of trust, a recognition of shared values that transcended their brief acquaintance. Lillian found herself noticing details she'd overlooked before. The gentle way his hands cradled the coffee cup despite their strength, the intelligence in his eyes, the quiet dignity with which he carried his past losses. The days leading up to the council meeting passed in a blur of preparation and increasing tension. True to Wyatt's prediction, Holloway's intimidation began the very next day when 2 unfamiliar men entered the shop, browsing without purpose while making pointed comments about businesses that don't last and accidents that happen to stubborn folks. Wyatt's presence discouraged anything beyond vague threats, but Lillian couldn't help feeling grateful he was there. Each night, they would discuss strategy over supper, examining the map and rehearsing arguments for the council meeting. During these conversations, Lillian found herself sharing stories of her father and their journey west after her mother's death, while Wyatt spoke of his travels throughout the territories. On Friday evening, as they sat in her small parlor reviewing their notes for Monday's meeting, a crash downstairs startled them both. Wyatt was on his feet instantly, grabbing the rifle he'd kept nearby. Stay here, he ordered, moving silently toward the stairs. Lillian ignored the command, following a few paces behind as he descended to the darkened shop. Moonlight streamed through a broken front window, illuminating shards of glass scattered across the floor. A large rock lay amid the debris, wrapped in paper secured by string. Wyatt quickly checked that no one remained in the shop, then picked up the rock and unwrapped the note. "Last warning," he read aloud, his voice tight with anger. "Accept the mayor's offer or lose more than a window." Lillian's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "They're getting desperate. They're getting dangerous," Wyatt corrected. "This isn't just about pressuring you anymore. Holloway's worried about what we've discovered." He moved to the broken window, peering cautiously into the street. "We need to board this up tonight." "I'll see if I can wake the carpenter." "There's wood in the storage room," Lillian said. "My father always kept supplies for repairs." While Wyatt gathered tools and boards, Lillian swept up the glass, her mind racing. The escalation suggested Holloway knew they had evidence that could thwart his plans. Had someone seen the map? Was there a spy among those who'd promised support? As they worked together to secure the window, their hands occasionally brushing, Lillian became acutely aware of Wyatt's proximity. Despite the circumstances, she felt safer than she had in days. "Thank you," she said quietly as they finished nailing the last board. "Not just for this, but for everything. Most people would have walked away by now." Wyatt set down the hammer, turning to face her fully. "I'm not most people, Lillian." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent an unexpected warmth through her. "No," she agreed softly. "You certainly aren't." For a moment they stood close in the moonlit shop, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Then Wyatt stepped back, clearing his throat. "We should get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow we need to gather our supporters and make sure everyone's prepared for Monday's meeting." Lillian nodded, reluctantly breaking the moment. "Good night, Wyatt." "Good night," he replied, his eyes following her as she climbed the stairs. Sleep eluded Lillian that night, her mind filled with concerns about the council meeting and conflicting emotions about the man sleeping downstairs. When she finally drifted off near dawn, her dreams were a confusing blend of silver veins, shattered glass, and Wyatt's steady gaze. Saturday brought unexpected allies. Word of the broken window spread quickly through town, and by mid-morning, several townspeople had stopped by to express support. Mrs. Daniels from the millinery shop brought fresh baked bread and promised to attend the meeting with her husband. Professor Whitmore arrived with additional documents supporting their case. Even Owen Harrigan closed his store briefly to help repair the damaged window properly. "Holloway's pushed folks too far this time," Owen commented as he helped Wyatt remove the temporary boards. "Threatening a woman running an honest business, it's crossed a line even for him." Wyatt nodded. "It's one thing to use legal maneuvers, another to resort to vandalism and threats." "Word is his mining investors are getting impatient," Owen said, lowering his voice. "They've put considerable money into equipment that's sitting idle while he tries to secure your property, Miss Price." This new information added urgency to their preparations. If Holloway was under pressure from investors, he might take more drastic measures before Monday's meeting. By Saturday evening, the shop window was repaired, and a small group of supporters had agreed to meet the next day to coordinate their approach for the council meeting. Lillian closed the shop early, exhaustion finally catching up with her. As she and Wyatt shared a simple dinner upstairs, the fatigue and tension of the past week suddenly overwhelmed her. Her hand trembled as she set down her fork, tears threatening despite her best efforts to maintain composure. "What if we fail?" she whispered. "What if Holloway's influence is too strong?" Wyatt reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "Then we'll appeal to the territorial court. If that fails, we'll take it higher." This isn't just about a bookshop anymore, Lillian, it's about standing against corruption and intimidation. His touch anchored her, warm and reassuring. When did this become your fight too? She asked softly. The moment I saw you reading that eviction notice with your head held high, he admitted. I recognized something in you, the same determination my father had, the same unwillingness to be bullied by men who think money gives them the right to take what isn't theirs. His honesty stripped away the last of her defenses. I've been alone for so long, she confessed. Since my father died, I've had to be strong, independent, never showing weakness or doubt. It's exhausting sometimes. Being strong doesn't mean being alone, Wyatt said gently. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from standing together. Their eyes met across the table, and in that moment, Lillian knew something fundamental had changed between them. This wasn't merely an alliance against a common enemy, it was the beginning of something deeper, something that both thrilled and terrified her. Wyatt's thumb traced a gentle pattern on the back of her hand. Whatever happens Monday, I want you to know I'm here because I choose to be. Not out of obligation or even just principle, but because he hesitated, seemingly searching for words. A pounding on the shop's back door interrupted the moment. Wyatt was instantly alert, withdrawing his hand and moving toward the stairs. Stay here, he said, the tenderness of moments before replaced by vigilance. This time Lillian obeyed, listening intently as Wyatt descended to the shop. She heard the back door open, followed by hushed male voices. After a few minutes, Wyatt returned, his expression grave. That was Ben Palmer, he explained. He rode into town to warn us. Holloway's men were at the Rusty Nail Saloon, drinking heavily and talking about taking care of the bookshop problem tonight. 3 of them left about an hour ago, armed. Alarm coursed through Lillian. You think they're coming here? It's likely. Ben's gone to alert Sheriff Miller, but Miller's loyalty to Holloway makes his help questionable. Wyatt checked his revolver. We need to leave now. Pack whatever's most valuable to you. We'll go to the Palmer Ranch until the council meeting. I won't be driven from my home, Lillian protested. That's exactly what Holloway wants. This isn't about pride anymore, Lillian. Those men are drunk and armed. If they're planning to burn you out or worse, staying here is too dangerous. His eyes pleaded with her. Please. I can protect you better at the ranch. The urgency in his voice convinced her where arguments might have failed. Quickly, Lillian gathered essential documents, her father's pocket watch, a small box of family photographs, and a change of clothing. As she packed, she heard Wyatt moving furniture downstairs, presumably barricading the doors. When she returned downstairs with her small bag, Wyatt was extinguishing the lamps, leaving only one burning dimly. Palmer left horses in the alley behind the mercantile, he explained in a hushed voice. We'll go out the back way, stay in the shadows. They slipped out the back door into the cool night air. The nearly full moon cast silver light over Hawthorne's rooftops as they moved silently through back alleys toward the mercantile. Every shadow seemed threatening, every distant voice a potential danger. They'd nearly reached their destination when Lillian heard heavy footsteps and slurred voices approaching from a side street. Wyatt pulled her quickly into a narrow space between buildings, pressing her against the wall and shielding her with his body. His nearness was both protective and intimate, his breath warm against her hair as they waited in tense silence. 3 men stumbled past their hiding place, one carrying a kerosene can, another a rifle. Their drunken conversation confirmed their intentions to burn the bookshop with Lillian inside, making it appear an accident. Holloway said make it look natural-like, one man slurred. Fire starts, building burns, problem solved. Lillian's heart pounded so loudly she feared the men might hear it. Wyatt's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing gently in reassurance. Only when the men had passed did he release her, though he kept his voice to a whisper. "They'll discover we're gone soon enough. We need to move quickly." They reached the horses without further incident, mounting swiftly and riding out of town by a back road that avoided the main street. As they crested the first rise outside Hawthorne, Lillian looked back to see distant figures rushing toward her shop, followed moments later by the alarming glow of flames. "They're burning it anyway," she gasped, reining her horse to a stop. Wyatt halted beside her. "I'm sorry, Lillian." In the distance, they could see people emerging from nearby buildings, forming a bucket line to fight the fire. Whether they would succeed in saving the structure was impossible to tell from this distance. "Everything I've built," Lillian whispered, tears finally overflowing. "All those books, the memories." Wyatt moved his horse closer, reaching across to touch her arm. "The building can be rebuilt, the books replaced. What matters is that you're safe." His voice hardened. "And that Holloway has just sealed his fate. Arson is a territorial offense. Even a mayor can't escape those charges." "If we can prove he was behind it," Lillian said, wiping away tears. "We will," Wyatt promised. "But first, we need to get to Palmer's ranch. It's not safe for you in town tonight." With a final glance at the distant flames, Lillian nodded and turned her horse toward the Palmer ranch. They rode in silence through the moonlit desert, each lost in their own thoughts. The emotional weight of the evening, from their interrupted moment of connection to the shock of seeing her shop in flames, left Lillian feeling both exhausted and strangely alert. The Palmer Ranch appeared as a cluster of low buildings about an hour's ride from town. As they approached, a lantern appeared in the doorway of the main house, and Ben Palmer himself stepped out to greet them. "Saw the glow from town," he said grimly. "They did it then." Wyatt nodded as he dismounted, moving to help Lillian from her horse. "Caught them in the act, but couldn't stop them without risking Lillian's safety." "You did right," Palmer assured him, leading them inside where his wife Martha waited with coffee and concern. "Sheriff Miller rode out not 10 minutes ago, heading toward town with 2 deputies. Seems someone finally convinced him to do his job." Inside the warmth of the Palmer home, Lillian gratefully accepted the coffee and the spare bedroom Martha offered. The reality of her situation was beginning to sink in. She was now homeless, her business destroyed, forced to rely on the kindness of virtual strangers. Yet as she looked at Wyatt's concerned face across the kitchen table, she couldn't summon regret for their escape. Had they remained, they might both be dead, victims of Holloway's desperation to silence opposition before the council meeting. "You should rest," Martha urged, noticing Lillian's exhaustion. "Things will look clearer in the morning." Lillian nodded gratefully, following her hostess to a small but comfortable bedroom. Once alone, she sat on the edge of the bed, still dressed, too overwrought for sleep despite her fatigue. A soft knock came at her door a short time later. She opened it to find Wyatt standing there, his expression a mixture of concern and something deeper. "I wanted to check on you," he said quietly. "Tonight was a lot to process." "Come in," she invited, suddenly unwilling to be alone with her thoughts. He entered hesitantly, remaining near the door. "Ben got word from town. They managed to save part of the building, but the shop itself is badly damaged." Lillian nodded, having expected as much. "At least I have the deed and the map. We can still make our case on Monday." "That's what I wanted to discuss. The council meeting may be more dangerous now. Holloway's desperate. He's committed arson, possibly attempted murder. He can't afford to let us present our evidence." "What are you suggesting?" "That we send the evidence with Ben tomorrow. He can take it to Judge Wilson in Carson City. The judge is known for his integrity. He'll issue an injunction against Holloway's plans once he sees the survey map and hears about tonight's events. Lillian considered this. And what about us? We stay here until it's safe to return. Wyatt ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Lillian had come to recognize as a sign of inner conflict. Lillian, before we were interrupted earlier, there was something I wanted to say. Her heart quickened. Yes. He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. I came to Hawthorne looking for a fresh start, someplace I could put down roots after years of drifting. I never expected to find someone who would make me want to stay, someone worth fighting for. He took her hands in his. These past days, working with you, getting to know you, it's changed something in me. In me as well, Lillian admitted softly. I've been so focused on independence, on proving I could manage alone, that I forgot what it means to share a burden, to trust someone else. You trust me, Lillian? With my life, she answered without hesitation. You've proven that much tonight. Wyatt's hands tightened on hers. What about with your heart? The directness of the question took her breath away. In the quiet of the borrowed bedroom, with the events of the night still fresh and her future uncertain, Lillian found clarity she hadn't expected. Yes, she whispered. I believe I do. He drew her gently closer, one hand rising to touch her cheek with a tenderness that made her eyes fill with tears again, not of sadness this time, but of wonder at how quickly life could change, how connection could form amid chaos. Whatever comes next, Wyatt promised, we'll face it together. When he kissed her, it felt like both a beginning and a coming home, a moment out of time yet perfectly placed within it. His lips were warm and certain against hers, communicating without words all they'd come to mean to each other in such a short time. When they finally parted, Lillian saw in his eyes the same amazement she felt, that amid loss and danger, they had found something precious and unexpected. You should rest now, Wyatt said, reluctantly stepping back. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. Lillian nodded, though she was reluctant to see him go. Good night, Wyatt. Good night, Lillian. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, I think your father would be proud of how you've stood your ground. After he left, Lillian finally changed into the nightgown Martha had lent her and slipped beneath the covers. Despite everything that had happened, she fell asleep with a strange sense of hope. She had lost her shop, yes, but perhaps found something of greater value. Sunday brought news from town via ranch hands who'd ridden in for supplies. Sheriff Miller had arrested 2 of Holloway's hired men, caught red-handed at the scene of the fire. The third had escaped, but was being sought throughout the territory. More significantly, Mayor Holloway himself had been brought in for questioning after one of the arrested men implicated him directly in planning the arson. The whole town's in an uproar, reported Tom Davidson, a neighboring rancher who'd stopped by Palmer's place. Half the council members are suddenly claiming they never trusted Holloway, the other half are lying low. Judge Wilson's been telegraphed to return early from Carson City for a special hearing. This news changed their strategy. Instead of sending the evidence with Ben, Wyatt and Lillian decided to return to town that afternoon to speak directly with the sheriff and prepare for both the council meeting and potential legal proceedings against Holloway. Before they left, Martha took Lillian aside, pressing a simple blue dress into her hands. It's not fancy, but it's clean and it should fit. You'll want to look your best when you face that council tomorrow. The kindness nearly undid Lillian again. I don't know how to thank you and Ben for everything. No thanks needed, Martha assured her. This territory needs more folks willing to stand up to men like Holloway. Besides, she added with a knowing smile, I've seen how Wyatt looks at you. Any friend of his is family to us. The ride back to Hawthorne was tense but determined. As they approached town, Lillian steeled herself for the sight of her damaged shop. The reality was both better and worse than she'd imagined. The front portion, where most of the books had been displayed, was charred and roofless. But the back room and upstairs living quarters appeared largely intact, protected by the Bucket Brigade's efforts. A crowd had gathered near the sheriff's office, and as Wyatt and Lillian dismounted, Professor Whitmore hurried to meet them. "Thank heaven you're both safe," he exclaimed. "When we realized you weren't in the building, we feared the worst until Ben Palmer's boy brought word you'd escaped." "What's happening here?" Wyatt asked, nodding toward the gathering. "Judge Wilson arrived an hour ago. He's hearing evidence against Holloway and his men." The professor lowered his voice. "The mayor's lawyer is trying to claim Holloway knew nothing about the arson, but one of the hired men is talking freely, hoping for leniency." Inside the sheriff's office, they found Judge Wilson, a stern-faced man in his 60s with a reputation for fairness, conducting an impromptu hearing. Sheriff Miller, looking uncomfortable but resolute, stood near the prisoners while various townspeople waited to give testimony. The judge looked up as they entered, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Miss Price, I presume? And Mr. Easton, your presence is most timely. I was just hearing about the events leading up to last night's fire." For the next 2 hours, Lillian and Wyatt provided their account of everything that had happened since the eviction notice, the discovery of the silver vein beneath her property, Holloway's threats and offers, and finally, their narrow escape from the arsonists. Professor Whitmore presented the survey map, explaining its significance to the judge. By evening, Judge Wilson had heard enough. "This court finds sufficient evidence to hold Mayor Theodore Holloway for trial on charges of conspiracy to commit arson, attempted fraud, and abuse of public office." His gavel cracked sharply. "Bail is denied pending trial in Carson City. The council meeting scheduled for tomorrow will proceed under Acting Mayor James Harrington to address the matter of Miss Price's property rights." As Holloway was led away in handcuffs, his face ashen with shock, Lillian felt a complex mixture of vindication, relief, and exhaustion. The fight wasn't entirely over. The council still needed to formally invalidate the eviction notice, but Holloway's power was broken. "Where will you stay tonight?" Wyatt asked as they left the sheriff's office. "Your living quarters might be safe structurally, but they'll smell of smoke." "Owen Harrigan offered me a room above his store," Lillian replied, "just until I can assess the damage to my place." Wyatt nodded, though she thought she detected disappointment in his expression. "I should return to the Palmer Ranch tonight, let them know what happened. I'll be back for the council meeting tomorrow." Before he could turn away, Lillian caught his hand. "Wyatt, wait." She glanced around at the busy street, then led him a few steps away for privacy. "Last night, what happened between us, it wasn't just the danger or the emotion of the moment. Not for me." His expression softened. "Nor for me, Lillian, but everything's happened so quickly. I want to be sure you have time to think clearly without pressure." "I've never thought more clearly," she assured him. "When I saw my shop burning, do you know what hurt most? Not the books or the business, but the thought that I might lose the place where I met you, where we worked together, where I first felt." She hesitated, then continued with quiet certainty. "Where I first felt myself falling in love." Wyatt's eyes widened slightly, then crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "You're certain?" "Completely," she affirmed. "Whatever comes next, rebuilding the shop, testifying at Holloway's trial, figuring out what to do about that silver vein, I want to face it with you." In response, Wyatt drew her into his arms, heedless of the curious glances from passers-by. "Then face it together we shall," he murmured before kissing her with a tenderness that promised far more than words could express. Monday's council meeting was anticlimactic after the drama of the previous days. Acting Mayor Harrington and the remaining council members unanimously voted to rescind the eviction notice and formally recognize Lillian's rightful ownership of her property. Furthermore, they approved an emergency fund to assist with rebuilding the damaged portion of her shop, acknowledging the town's failure to protect a business owner from criminal intimidation. The matter of the silver vein required more discussion. Professor Whitmore suggested, and the council agreed, that the town should commission a proper geological survey to determine the vein's full extent and value. Once complete, Lillian would have options. She could sell mining rights while maintaining surface ownership of her property, partner with legitimate investors for a careful extraction that wouldn't damage the building, or simply leave the silver where it lay. No rush to decide, Wyatt advised as they walked from the meeting hall toward her damaged shop. Silver's been in the ground for thousands of years. It can wait until you're ready. The next weeks passed in a blur of activity. With help from townspeople eager to make amends for their previous silence, Lillian's shop was gradually rebuilt. Wyatt took leave from the Palmer Ranch to oversee the construction, ensuring that the new portion of the building was stronger than before. Book donations arrived from as far away as San Francisco, sent by merchants who'd heard of Hawthorne's scandal and admired Lillian's stand against corruption. Throughout the rebuilding, Wyatt remained by Lillian's side not just as a protector or ally now, but as a partner in every sense. Their evening conversations expanded from immediate concerns to dreams of the future, to shared confidences about their pasts, to quiet moments of growing intimacy. By the time summer turned to fall, the rebuilt shop was ready to reopen, its facade proudly displaying a new sign: Price and Easton Booksellers and Lending Library. The addition of Wyatt's name had been Lillian's suggestion, a public declaration of their partnership that went beyond business. On the evening before the grand reopening, they stood together in the new shop, admiring the freshly painted shelves stocked with a combination of salvaged and donated books. "It's better than before," Lillian observed, leaning into Wyatt's embrace. "Stronger, like us." "Speaking of us," Wyatt said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. He reached into his pocket, producing a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment." Lillian's heart quickened as he opened the box to reveal a delicate silver ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "I know it hasn't been that long," Wyatt began, "but when you know something's right, time doesn't seem to matter much. When I rode into Hawthorne 6 months ago, I was still running from my past, still looking for a place to belong." He took her hand. "I found that place the moment I saw you standing up to Holloway. I found my future." Tears of joy blurred Lillian's vision. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Wyatt Easton?" He smiled, dropping to one knee in the traditional gesture. "Lillian Price, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me here in Hawthorne, turning this shop into the beginning of our legacy together?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. 1,000 times yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, Lillian reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. An unjust eviction, a chance encounter, a desperate escape, all leading to the most precious discovery of her life. Not silver or gold, but a love worth fighting for. They married 2 weeks later in a ceremony attended by most of the town. Judge Wilson himself presided, having returned to Hawthorne specifically for the occasion after overseeing Theodore Holloway's conviction and sentencing in Carson City. In the years that followed, Price and Easton Booksellers became a cornerstone of Hawthorne's community. The silver vein beneath the property was eventually mined through a careful arrangement that allowed the shop to remain open and intact while providing enough profit to establish a town library and school, named in honor of Lillian's father. Wyatt and Lillian welcomed their first child, a son named James, the following year, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Catherine. The rooms above the shop expanded to accommodate their growing family, and Wyatt's knowledge of ranching eventually led them to purchase a small property outside town, where their children could experience both the literary world Lillian loved and the open spaces that had shaped Wyatt. On the 5th anniversary of the night they fled the arsonists, Wyatt and Lillian stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching their children play in the yard as the sun set over the Nevada mountains. You ever think about how differently things might have turned out? Lillian asked, leaning against her husband's solid shoulder. If you hadn't been in Harrigan's store that day, if you hadn't offered to help. Sometimes, Wyatt admitted, his arm tightening around her waist. But then I remember what you said when Holloway delivered that eviction notice. You were standing on the boardwalk, letter in hand, and you told Owen you'd fight it somehow. And you overheard, Lillian recalled. I did. And I thought to myself, there's a woman being forced to leave everything behind. That's when I knew I had to help. He turned to face her fully, the love of 5 years deepening rather than diminishing with time. I believe I said something like, not if I can help it. Lillian smiled, remembering how those simple words had changed the course of her life. You've been helping ever since. And I always will, Wyatt promised, drawing her close as the last rays of sunlight gilded their home and family in gold more precious than any silver vein hidden beneath the earth.